Hey there, Patrick here. Today I'm covering horrific deaths on live TV. I almost didn't cover this, because what these broadcasts captured is hard to forget. From a fishing tournament where boats disappeared into heavy fog, to a polar plunge where a man sank face down while no one realized what was happening. It was October 19th, 2019, and a thick pre-dawn fog hung over a reservoir in the Ozark foothills of southwestern Missouri, reducing visibility across the water to less than 40 feet. Dozens of bass boats idled in staggered rows near the marina dock, their running lights cutting faint halos through the gray air as a helicopter circled above for the regional sports network's live broadcast. Daryl Stoyko was 41 years old and worked as a regional sales manager for an agricultural supply distributor in the Ozarks. For over a decade, he had spent nearly every weekend of tournament season driving hours to compete in regional base circuits. He was married with 2 young children. His wife later told investigators that Daryl called her from the marina at dawn before every tournament. The routine never changed in 11 years. He would read her the boat number he drew, tell her which arm of the lake he planned to fish first, and promised to call again at weigh-in. She said he never once missed that call. That detail is the kind of thing that hits you later, and it hasn't stopped hitting me since I found it. Fellow competitors described Daryl as aggressive off the line. He treated shotgun starts, where the entire field launches simultaneously, the way some drivers treat a green light, hammering the throttle within seconds to claim his preferred water before anyone else reached it. A tournament director from a previous season had issued him a verbal warning after he nearly clipped another boat accelerating out of the pack. A fishing partner later said Daryl laughed it off at the dock, saying the other boat should have held its line. And I think that right there tells you everything about how he approached that morning. That morning's tournament carried a significant cash purse. Over 70 boats were registered in a traditional shotgun start format. The fog was denser than forecast. Officials discussed a delay but ultimately proceeded, noting the rules permitted launch and reduced visibility provided running lights were active. I need you to brace yourself here, because the helicopter footage of what comes next is one of the most chaotic things I've ever seen, broken down frame by frame. At the signal, the fleet surged forward. The helicopter camera captured a spreading fan of white wakes cutting through gray water, boats accelerating in every direction. Daryl's boat was among the fastest off the line, running at full throttle within seconds, his hull planing hard toward the northwest arm. Helicopter footage showed his boat traveling at an estimated 58 miles per hour. Roughly 12 seconds after launch, another competitor's boat cut across his path from the right. The crossing boat appeared in his lane less than 3 seconds before impact. At that speed, neither operator had time to react. The collision was captured from above. Daryl's bow struck the crossing boat's port side at a steep angle. The impact sheared the front of his hull and launched him from the driver's seat. His body traveled an estimated 30 feet through the air before striking the water at roughly the same speed the boat had been traveling. At that velocity, the water surface behaves closer to a solid than a liquid. His body skipped once, then went under. The crossing boat's operator was thrown clear and sustained non-fatal injuries. A trailing boat, third in the line heading toward the same arm, passed through the debris field 4 seconds later. Its operator later told investigators he never saw Daryl in the water. The boat's lower unit passed directly over the area where he had submerged. I want you to sit with that for a second. 3 boats, 12 seconds, and a man in the water that nobody could see. The helicopter camera operator radioed down immediately. Tournament officials halted the start and directed all boats to kill engines. Safety boats reached the collision zone within 2 minutes. Daryl was pulled from the water roughly 60 feet from the initial impact point. He showed no signs of life. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be massive blunt force trauma, severe skull fractures, cervical spine fractures, and catastrophic thoracic injuries consistent with a secondary propeller strike while submerged and incapacitated. Based on the investigation reports I went through, that trailing boat is what killed him. The tournament organization suspended all shotgun start formats across its affiliated circuits, and every sanctioned event adopted staggered interval launches with minimum visibility requirements the following season. This next story is one I kept coming back to while putting this video together. An Icelandic strongman competing on the biggest stage of his life, and the thing that sends it all spiraling down isn't the weight. It's something that had been hiding inside him the entire time. It was July 18th, 2015, and sharp midday light poured through the open sides of a competition tent on a sports complex outside Akureyri, Iceland, where several hundred spectators surrounded a raised platform lined with 5 progressively larger granite atlas stones. The event was being broadcast live on a national sports channel as part of an international strongman invitational. Halldór Sigfinnsson was 29 years old and worked as a plant operator at a geothermal energy facility in northern Iceland. At 6'4" and roughly 330 pounds, he had spent 7 years competing on the national strongman circuit. He lived with his long-term girlfriend outside Akureyri. This invitational was his first appearance at the international level, the stage he had been building toward since 22. His girlfriend later told investigators about a habit that started at his very first local contest. A young boy in the front row had looked terrified of him, and Halldór spent 10 minutes making faces until the kid laughed. After that, at every competition, he would find the nearest child at the crowd barrier and wave them over to flex, roar, and break into an exaggerated grin. He had done it twice already that afternoon. The broadcast cameras caught both interactions. I watched those clips during my research, and honestly, they broke me, because you can see exactly who this guy was. Training partners later told investigators that in the months before the competition, Halldór experienced episodes of sharp chest pain and dizziness during heavy sessions. He attributed them to muscle strain and acid reflux. His girlfriend urged him to see a doctor. He told her he couldn't take time away from training before qualifiers. And for me, that's one of the most dangerous things a person can do. Convince themselves the warning signs are something else, because the goal is too important to stop. The Atlas Stone series was the final event. 5 stones of increasing weight, 5 platforms of increasing height, 90 seconds to load as many as possible. Halldór moved through the first 3, 280, 320, and 350 pounds, with controlled aggression. The 4th, at 370 pounds, slowed him. The clock showed 61 seconds remaining. He stepped to the 5th stone, 390 pounds of polished granite. He chalked his forearms, crouched, and wrapped his arms around its circumference. He pulled it to his lap, drove upward through his hips and legs, and rolled the stone onto the final platform. He straightened. Both arms rose above his head. The crowd roared. He held the pose for roughly 2 seconds. Then his arms dropped simultaneously, as if the strings holding them had been cut. His knees buckled inward, and he collapsed straight down, not forward, not backward, but vertically, onto the platform base. No stumble, no stagger, no attempt to catch himself. His body hit the concrete with a sound audible on the broadcast microphones. That moment, the arms going up and then just dropping, is something I haven't been able to get out of my head. Medical staff reached him within 5 seconds. No pulse. CPR began on the platform while the broadcast cut wide. Resuscitation continued for over 30 minutes. He was transported to a regional hospital and pronounced dead. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be acute aortic dissection, triggered by extreme intrathoracic pressure during the maximal lift. Autopsy revealed a previously undiagnosed connective tissue abnormality in the aortic wall. The International Federation implemented mandatory cardiovascular screening for all competitors the following season. His girlfriend established a cardiac screening fund for young strength athletes in his name. Okay, so this next one takes place in a rodeo arena in West Texas. And I need to warn you, the broadcast camera never looks away. Not once. It was September 6th, 2014, and late afternoon sun threw long shadows across the dirt arena floor of an outdoor rodeo complex in the Permian Basin of West Texas, where a semi-pro bull riding event was being broadcast live on a regional sports network. Metal chutes lined the far end, and the smell of livestock and dust carried across stands holding roughly 2,000 spectators. Cason Thedford was 24 years old and worked as a roughneck on drilling crews in the oil fields west of Midland. On weekends, he competed in amateur and semi-pro bull riding, something he had done since junior rodeo at 15. Unmarried with no children, he still lived near the small cattle operation where he grew up. Broadcast footage from earlier that evening showed Cason behind the chutes, doing what everyone who knew him recognized, re-wrapping his riding glove. He would pull the wrap tight, study it, strip it off, and start again. A commentator, filling dead air between rides, joked that Cason had re-wrapped that glove more times than he'd ridden that season. I watched that footage back a few times, and there's something about it, the focus, the repetition, that makes what comes next so much worse. Fellow riders later told investigators Cason's bull rope had been visibly frayed for months. Several competitors suggested he replace it. He dismissed them, saying it was broken in perfectly. He had used the same rope for 3 seasons. The braiding near the handhold was worn thin in 2 places, and that detail is critical, because that rope is the reason he doesn't walk out of that arena. That evening's event was a final qualifying round for a higher-tier national circuit. He had drawn a bull known for explosive lateral spinning, a pattern that puts extreme rotational stress on the rider's grip hand. Cason settled onto the bull in chute 4. Broadcast footage shows him working the rope wrap around his gloved hand, threading the tail between his fingers, pulling tight, closing his fist. He nodded. The gate opened. The bull launched hard left, then reversed into a right-hand spin with its head low. Cason stayed centered for roughly 3 seconds. On the 4th spin, the bull kicked high while still rotating, and Cason's hips separated from its back. He was airborne off the right side. His riding hand did not release. The frayed rope, torqued tight by rotational force, bound around his glove and locked. He was hung up, suspended by one arm, his legs dragging and bouncing against the ground. Bullfighters moved in immediately. The bull kept spinning, aware of the weight on its side. Cason's body swung outward on each rotation, then slammed back against the bull's ribs. His boots carved arcs through the dirt with each pass. On the 3rd rotation after the hang-up, the bull reversed direction sharply. Cason's body swung beneath its front end. The bull's hooves came down on his torso. The crowd went silent. The bull continued moving, dragging him in a tight circle. A second hoof struck his head. His body went limp but remained attached by the bound hand. The broadcast camera, trained to follow the bull, never broke from the shot. And that's 11 seconds. I counted. 11 seconds where everyone in that arena and everyone watching at home can see what's happening, and nobody can stop it. A bullfighter reached the rope and cut it roughly 11 seconds after the hang-up. Cason dropped into the dirt and did not move. Medical staff reached him within seconds. No pulse. Resuscitation was performed in the arena. He was airlifted to a regional trauma center and pronounced dead. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be catastrophic blunt force trauma, multiple cranial fractures, crushed thorax with flail chest, and massive internal hemorrhaging consistent with repeated hoof impacts. Investigation confirmed the frayed braid allowed the wrap to cinch rather than release under tension. The regional circuit issued mandatory equipment inspection standards the following season. This next story is the one that made me the most angry while researching this video. Because she was 19 years old, it was her first parade, and she did nothing wrong. It was February 22nd, 2018, and a warm Gulf breeze pushed through the oak-lined streets of a small city in southern Louisiana, where tens of thousands packed the sidewalks for the final major parade of the Mardi Gras season. A regional television affiliate carried the broadcast live, with commentary cameras positioned along the route. Teslyn Aucoin was 19 years old and a freshman at a university in southern Louisiana, majoring in dance performance. She had grown up in a small town in Acadiana and been dancing since she was 5. This was her first year riding on a parade float, selected as one of 6 performers on a crew float known for elaborate choreography. Her roommate later told investigators Teslyn spent the entire week before the parade altering her costume by hand, stitching extra sequins onto the bodice and hemming the skirt shorter so it wouldn't catch on anything while she danced. She stayed up past 2 in the morning the night before finishing. That detail wrecked me. She shortened the skirt specifically so it wouldn't get caught. Her parents and younger sister planned to watch from the rote and the broadcast at home. The cruise float was a 2-tiered motorized structure roughly 40 feet long, built on a converted flatbed chassis with a chain drive system powering the rear wheels. Decorative skirting of fabric and plywood concealed the undercarriage. A driver operated from an enclosed cab at the front, communicating by radio with a road captain walking alongside. From the investigation records I went through, that float had not passed a mechanical safety inspection, a requirement that existed on paper but hadn't been enforced in over a decade. Teslin was positioned on the upper deck's rear section, closest to where the skirting met the deck edge. The float was halfway through the route. The broadcast camera had locked onto it, approaching the main grandstand. Teslin was mid-routine, arms raised, moving in sync with the other dancers. A section of skirting on the left rear side detached from its mounting. The fabric panel dropped and was immediately caught by the exposed chain drive beneath the deck. The chain pulled the fabric taut in a rapid downward motion. Teslin's costume hemline made contact with the snagged material as tension dragged it across the deck surface. The force pulled her legs out from under her. She went down hard and was dragged toward the gap between the deck edge and the undercarriage. Other performers saw her fall and began screaming. One grabbed for her arms. The chain drive continued pulling the entangled material downward with mechanical force no one on the deck could counter by hand. Her lower body was pulled into the gap. The float was still moving. The driver could not hear the screams over the engine and crowd noise. The road captain, on the opposite side, was not immediately aware. The broadcast camera captured the other performers waving and screaming toward the crowd. The road captain reached the driver on radio approximately 8 seconds after the entanglement. The float stopped. Responders along the route reached it within 2 minutes. Extraction required disassembly of the drive housing, taking 14 minutes. Teslin was conscious, but in severe distress, her screams audible to spectators along the nearest 50 feet of the route. She was transported to a regional trauma center. Her parents were watching the broadcast at home. I keep thinking about that, and I don't know how you process something like that. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be traumatic hemorrhagic shock from crush injuries and partial traumatic amputation of the left leg, sustained by entanglement in the chain drive mechanism. She died during transport. The state legislature passed a law requiring certified mechanical inspections of all motorized parade floats. The crew was dissolved. Teslin's university established a performing arts safety scholarship in her name. Okay, so this next one takes place live on a Friday morning news broadcast in Colorado. A skydive that was supposed to introduce the station's new co-anchor, and the man jumping had done this hundreds of times before, which honestly makes it worse. It was September 8th, 2017, and a cloudless Friday morning over Colorado's Front Range carried the faint smell of dry grass as a regional morning television crew set up beside a small municipal airstrip outside Denver. The broadcast was scheduled live at 7:30, with ground cameras at the landing zone roughly 300 yards from the runway. Bridger Kellaway was 37 years old and worked as the adventure sports correspondent for a regional morning news program. A former Army paratrooper with over 200 military jumps and roughly 150 civilian recreational jumps, he had built his on-air identity around live adventure segments. Divorced with one young son. The show's producer later told investigators Bridger had one ritual he never skipped. Before every adventure segment, he looked directly into the camera and gave a double thumbs up. It was for his son, who watched every segment live before school. The producer said Bridger's face always changed when he did it, the bravado dropping for a second. That morning, standing in the aircraft door at altitude, he gave the thumbs up into his helmet camera. The studio audience saw it in real time. That image, the thumbs up from the door, is the one I can't shake. His son was watching. Fellow jumpers at the airfield said Bridger seemed rushed that morning. He arrived late, packed his main canopy while simultaneously coordinating camera angles and audio feeds for the broadcast. Two jumpers who watched him pack noted he moved quickly and skipped his usual line check before closing the container. He had pitched the segment himself, a live solo jump alongside the co-anchor doing a tandem with a certified instructor. Sweeps week feature, high visibility. And from everything I found in my research, the rush that morning came down to the broadcast schedule. He was packing to make a TV deadline, not a safety one. The aircraft climbed to 13,000 feet. Bridger exited first, his helmet camera recording the jump. Stable freefall, clear skies, clean exit. The co-anchor and her instructor exited seconds after on a separate trajectory. At approximately 5,500 feet, Bridger deployed his main canopy. Footage later recovered from his helmet camera captured what followed. The canopy emerged but failed to inflate symmetrically. The left side streamed upward while the right remained collapsed and tangled in its own lines. The canopy spun immediately, sending him into rapid rotation. He was losing altitude fast under a non-functional main. He executed a cutaway and immediately deployed his reserve. The reserve pilot chute launched, and the canopy began to emerge. But the main, though released from the risers, had not fully cleared. Lines from the collapsing main tangled with the deploying reserve. The reserve inflated partially, caught in a twisted mess of nylon and suspension lines from both canopies. I need you to understand what that means. He did everything right in that moment. Cutaway, reserve, textbook. And it still wasn't enough because of what happened on the ground hours earlier. The ground camera crew tracked his descent. The broadcast showed a wide shot, a figure descending far faster than expected beneath what was clearly not a fully inflated canopy. The studio hosts went quiet. And that silence on a live morning show, where the hosts realize what they're watching before the audience does, is something the producer later said none of them have recovered from. Bridger struck the field approximately 220 yards from the landing zone at an estimated 45 to 55 miles per hour. The ground camera captured the impact, while his helmet footage ended at that moment. The co-anchor landed safely 3 minutes later. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be massive polytrauma from high-velocity ground impact, catastrophic cranial fractures, thoracic crush injuries, and bilateral femoral fractures. The Aviation Authority identified a packing error in the main canopy. The reserve deployment was compromised when the released main canopy failed to fully clear, leading to entanglement between both systems. The station permanently canceled all live adventure segments. This last story is the one I saved for the end, and it's for a reason. There's no stunt, no recklessness, no ignored warning, just a frozen lake, a charity event, and a crowd of people who had no idea they were watching a man die. It was January 13th, 2018, and a bitter wind drove the temperature to 6 degrees below zero across a frozen lake in the western suburbs of Minneapolis, where over 800 people gathered along a plowed shoreline for the 9th annual Polar Plunge, benefiting a local children's charity. A regional television affiliate carried the event live during its Saturday midday broadcast. Martin Veldhuizen was 58 years old and ran a small commercial printing business in suburban Minneapolis. Dutch-American, second generation. At roughly 260 pounds on a 5'10" frame, he carried his weight the way a man does who was thick and strong in his 30s and never adjusted his habits. Married with 3 adult children, he had recently become a grandfather. Organizers later said Martin arrived over an hour early and spent the time walking the staging area, shaking hands with volunteers and participants. He was handing out business cards from his print shop, not for business, but because he had a photo of his newest grandchild printed on the back of every card. He showed it to at least a dozen people, holding each one out with both hands as if presenting a certificate. I keep coming back to that image. A man handing out pictures of his grandchild to strangers, an hour before he dies, in front of all of them. His wife later told investigators his doctor had recommended a cardiology referral 2 years earlier after elevated blood pressure readings. Martin never made the appointment. He considered himself healthy because he was active. Morning walks, youth hockey booster club, charity events. He had completed the same plunge the 2 previous years without incident. And I think that's exactly what made it feel safe. He'd done it before. So why would this time be any different? This was his third consecutive year, and he had raised more in individual pledges than any other participant, a fact the MC announced as plungers lined up along the cut in the ice. The broadcast camera was positioned at the shoreline, framing the opening. Water temperature was estimated at 34 degrees. At the signal, roughly 30 plungers in the first wave charged across the ice shelf and into the water. Martin was near the middle, visible on the broadcast in swim trunks and a knit cap with his shop's logo. He entered at a full run, submerging to chest level within 2 strides. He surfaced once, arms splashing outward. Then his movements stopped. His body drifted slightly right of the entry point and settled face down, arms at his sides. Other plungers around him were screaming, laughing, scrambling back toward the ice shelf, the normal chaos of a polar plunge. No one near him reacted. From the broadcast angle, his stillness was visible, but indistinguishable from someone floating deliberately. The broadcast camera was still rolling on the wide shot. Martin was visible as a motionless figure while bodies moved around him. One plunger splashed past within arm's reach, laughing without looking down. 15 seconds passed, 20. And I need you to understand, 20 seconds doesn't sound long, but when you watch this footage knowing what's happening, it feels like an hour. A volunteer on the ice shelf pointed. 30 seconds after he went still, a safety diver reached him and turned him onto his back. His face was slack, lips showing discoloration. 2 more volunteers pulled him onto the ice shelf. CPR began within a minute. Paramedics reached him quickly. Resuscitation continued for over 20 minutes on the ice. He was transported to a regional hospital and pronounced dead. His wife was in the crowd. She didn't know until they pulled him out of the water. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be sudden cardiac arrest, triggered by cold water immersion shock, with autopsy revealing undiagnosed severe coronary artery disease and left ventricular hypertrophy. The charity organization implemented mandatory medical screening waivers with cardiac risk questionnaires for all future participants. Martin's family established a cardiac screening fund through the organization in his name.